Well, hello there. My name is Mark Miles, and in this video, I want to go through some fundamental things that we need to be aware of if we are going to successfully deliver online training. And in this video, I'm not necessarily going to talk about the features of Zoom, but I'm going to go through the mindset of a successful presenter and trainer that uses Zoom and how you can adopt some of these principles that you may be so good at in the face-to-face environment and how you can apply them to the Zoom environment, okay? And whether you are a public speaker, presenter, trainer, whatever you may be, if you are using Zoom, you need to have the right mentality around online delivery in order for it to be successful. So let me quickly go ahead and bring up my slides so that you guys can follow along with the content. And awesome, let me do that right now. Okay, so as I said, this video is all about you guys developing the skills, the structure, and more importantly, the mindset about how to deliver training effectively via Zoom, okay? So I will be going through some slides, and whether you are a person that's used Zoom for many years or just starting out, I'm definitely going to share some stuff that you can take away and implement. And as we all know, with the onset of the, I guess, technological changes and different health situations that we've had over the last couple of years, there has been a huge shift from face-to-face delivery of training to online delivery. All right. So as a trainer, a competent trainer, you have to be very comfortable in both the face-to-face environment and also the online environment. Okay. And the number one question I get asked right now is, how do I create engagement with my audiences? I'm delivering training, but people are just not getting engaged with me as I'm delivering online, and it's so hard. Well, I want to solve that problem for you in this video right now. All right, so let's dive deep into the content. So first of all, we do need to be aware that there are differences between face-to-face delivery and Zoom online delivery, okay? And you can even put in Teams delivery or other features and software or other types of software into this conversation as well. But today's just going to focus on Zoom, so to speak, okay? Now, as we all know, with face-to-face delivery, we can see the people in front of us, we can do practical activities, and it's a lot easier to actually manage a session. Now, with Zoom, though, there are a number of limitations. We need to be aware of those limitations, but we need to still be able to exploit those limitations and use them to our best advantage. And there are a number of things we can't do, but there are a number of things that we still can do, even if we are delivering on Zoom. Okay, so now let's take a look at the fundamental differences, though. Okay, so most common differences and challenges. All right, so number one, we need to be aware of tech issues. We need to be aware of those tech issues that are going to happen for you and for your participants as well. So we need to be aware that maybe your internet's going to stop. Maybe their internet's going to stop. Maybe Zoom's going to crash on you while you're delivering training. Maybe there's going to be a virus in their computer, or maybe there's going to be a computer overload or whatever it may be. And there's tech issues that are going to happen that you don't typically face in the face-to-face environment so much. Okay, certainly they're going to happen, but not as much. Okay, now also digital literacy is a huge challenge and a struggle for a lot of people, and a factor that we need to think about when we're delivering online. So with digital literacy, maybe you've got participants that are exceptionally good at using computers. Maybe you've got participants that are struggling with it and it's not their cup of tea and they really need the extra support. So you're going to find whenever you're delivering online training, you're going to find a huge range of different people with different abilities. Okay. Now, number three is you can't see people's body language. This is a really important one because when you're delivering face to face, obviously you can see how your message lands. You can see how people are feeling emotionally. It's a lot easier to read the room, so to speak. If you're delivering online, it's a lot harder because you can only generally, if people have their videos on, you can only see from top down, so shoulders downwise. So it's really important to make sure that you do take, how do I put this? You do show empathy and you project emotional concern and care for your participants, and really make sure that your participants are keeping up and they're feeling comfortable with what you're going through and training them on. Okay, because people could leave a session and you wouldn't even know why they've left. All right, in a face-to-face environment, that doesn't happen as often, right? And if it did, you would know potentially what caused this situation or whatever it might be. Next one, number 4. It's a lot harder to balance visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Visual, we all know, is about being out, people seeing things. Auditory, you can do discussions in breakout rooms. Kinesthetic is a lot harder because in the face-to-face environment, you can do practical activities really easily. But in the online environment, it's a lot harder to get people to do things because you literally can't, set up activities as easily. You can't control what they have, what they don't have, and it's just a lot harder to do the kinesthetic side of things. Okay. Number 5, it's harder to know if people are keeping up, and it's really important that you are aware if people are keeping up or not. In the face-to-face environment, you can walk around the room, you can see if people are keeping up or not. Number 6, people are more easily distracted in the online environment. Maybe they're sitting at home, maybe they've got things going on around them, maybe even behind you. If you are the presenter, there may be things going on, right? So you need to be aware of your environment, and you need to be aware that learners' environments themselves are going to have distractions. So that's something that we need to keep in mind. Okay. Having said that, there are ways and strategies that we can navigate all those different things, and like little cushions that we can put in place to make sure that we are able to buffer those issues, so to speak. Okay. So now let's look at the inconvenient truth about online delivery and about group sizes. So generally we find with face-to-face, the larger the group, the easier it actually is to deliver. Because we find the larger the group, the more personalities you're going to have, the more variety of learning styles, and that's really cool. But contrarily, or on the opposite side, with online, the smaller the group, the easier it is. Okay, because the easier it is to navigate if people are keeping up and getting people to respond and getting people actively involved. The larger the group, the harder it is for you as a facilitator to track how people are going and have visibility on that. Okay, so generally we like to say any, like, a group size like 15 and below is safe and steady. Over 15, it's a lot harder for you to manage and get response from your participants. So generally, if you can keep it around 12, 15 as your max, that's going to be ideal. Okay, but we are aware that anytime you're delivering a presentation, sometimes you can't control the numbers, but in optimal delivery situations, if you can cap it around 12, 15, that's going to be great for you. Okay, so now let's acknowledge the great things. Let's acknowledge the cool things about delivering online. Well, you never have to leave home. Well, that's a really cool thing. Or you never have to leave the comfort of your office. You don't need to show up to a venue and prep it and get all the equipment ready and all those different things. You can just do it in the comfort of your own home. Number 2, you can wear shorts. All right, bit of a joke there, but you don't need to get all dressed up completely. All right. Next, you can certainly have direct contact with participants via the chat box, and that's really cool. And you can certainly use online delivery to minimize business risks if there's pandemics going on, or weather conditions, or whatever it might be. So online delivery certainly opens up a lot of capacity to impact bigger audiences because they don't need to travel themselves as well. Okay. Now, in the face-to-face environment, you're going to have your slide deck or your PowerPoints, and that's really cool. Then when we move on to the online environment, we can certainly have our PowerPoints, but there are things that we need to add in order for our PowerPoints to be successful, okay? And for people to travel through our session and be able to perform at the requirements and expectations that we may have, right? So there's a couple of things we want to add into our PowerPoint slide deck if we are delivering online, all right? So extra things to add into your PowerPoint slides. All right, so the first thing that you do want to make sure that you do is an audio check, right? So when you first start out your presentation, you do want to check that people can hear you and see you. And a simple way to do that is to say to your audience, hi guys, before we get started, just want to check that you can hear me and see me. Give me 2 thumbs up if you can hear me and see me, all right? Very simple way to do it. Also chat box, all right? Chat box is something that we highly recommend that you use very regularly. And you do want to encourage people within the first like 2-3 minutes to respond in the chat box. So everyone, please find the chat box and type your name into the chat box. All right, it could be something as simple as that, but you want to teach people to be able to find the chat box. All right. Second, you do want to include a safety slide, and I'll show you an example of that. You want to include rules of engagement. These are critically important, especially for operating in the Zoom space or in the online space. Next, you want to possibly have a segment on how to use Zoom, all right? You want to teach people how to actually use the functionality, and you want to take a couple of moments to do that. Possibly, not always, all right? But it can be a good thing to do for courtesy. All right, so here's an example of a safety slide that you may include. So there we've got identify your own exits, make sure that you are comfortable and in an ergonomic fashion. Ideally have 2 screens. I like to encourage my participants to have 2 screens if possible. Minimize distractions. I always like to remind people to do that. Know where your nearest coffee is, all right? Remind people to have some coffee. Stay hydrated, and don't worry, we'll be taking lots and lots of regular breaks, all right? Now, already you probably noticed it on my slides. I've got blanks, or I've got words that are not filled out. One of the reasons for that is to build engagement and for my participants to know that in order to know what's going on, they're going to need to listen up. All right. It's a really important frame that you need to set up really early on, because you don't want people tuning out. And that's going to happen very quickly if you don't set up the right frames. All right. So next one is the rules of engagement. This is critically important. Whether you're delivering training to adult learners or even younger learners, whatever it might be, you've got to set up the rules that you insist that people play by. So you can create your own rules, and these are just some suggestions that I've got here on the slides. So number 1 is participate fully. You really want to encourage people to participate as much as possible. Number 2 there, we've got take notes, as all items will relate to an assessment question. All right, I love to set up that rule because it gives them a reason to listen, a reason to pay attention, and for them to know that there is a reason why you are doing everything that you say. So you could change it to an assessment question, to an activity that we're doing later on, or to a key thing that we're going to set up. You've got to just set up a reason for them to take notes. All right. Number 3, come back from breaks on time. What I love to do is have regular breaks, but also I will type the comeback time into the chat box so people know when to come back. All right, it's just a hack that you can do and implement. Number 4, prove competency to me. Put answers into a sentence. All right, so you can set up the frame however you expect performance to be, and you go prove performance or prove excellence to me, whatever it might be. Number 5 is a really important one. Collaborate, support, and give grace to others, especially in regards to tech. So you want to set up a learning environment where it's okay for things to go wrong. It's okay for mistakes to happen, and you want to encourage people to be patient and caring and understanding with others. All right. I highly recommend that you set up number 5 as your ground rule. Number 6 is even more important, which is excuse people's spelling. Okay. Because in an online environment, people already feel intimidated. So you want to set up an environment where it's okay for people to make mistakes with spelling. All right. Maybe you make a mistake as a presenter, maybe they do, but the last thing you want is for people to feel self-conscious around their spelling. Number 7 is one person shares at a time, especially due to tech issues, right? So if 2 people are sharing, like just because of technology, you can't hear the 2 people at the same time. So just encourage people to know one person sharing, one person sharing. Number 8, phones on quiet. Number 9, have fun. Number 10, don't laugh at my jokes unless truly funny. Just a weird, wacky, crazy rule to put in there. Be willing to make mistakes and feel uncomfortable. Number 12, ask questions. Number 13, keep video on when in attendance. So I really encourage people to do that. If there is a circumstance where they can't, I understand, it's okay, but I do like to let them know that for safety reasons, I do want them to keep their video on. Number 14, is keep yourself on mute unless you are sharing or speaking. And number 15, I do encourage people to, if they are going away, to put a message in the chat box, just so that the trainer presenter knows that they ask that the participant is safe. So I do encourage people, if something's going on, that's okay, go deal with it. But just as a courtesy, tell your presenter or your trainer, I'm stepping away because I've got to feed the dog or something's just happened, right? So I set that as one of my ground rules. Okay, so that is an example of a ground rules slide or rules of engagement slide that you can set up. And as you can see from this slide, the ones in bold, 5, 6, 7, 13, 14, 15, they're the ones that really apply to the online environment, okay? And again, you can set up different ground rules to these, but I highly recommend, if I insist, that you do set up rules of engagement. Okay, so navigating Zoom, you may have a couple of slides. We actually teach on how to actually use Zoom. Just out of courtesy, it can be a good idea. Okay, just so that people don't get lost as you tell them to do different things. Okay, so here's another slide that you can show for navigating Zoom. And then we've got the chat box, okay? So chat box is something I absolutely love to use and use all of the time. So I really encourage people to get comfortable to put their answers or their responses into the chat box. And as a trainer, highly recommend that you use it in order to get activity happening, engagement, asking questions to the group, and really creating a sense of the response is going to happen, the majority of it, in the chat box, okay? And light that chat box up because it's your greatest tool. In a face-to-face environment, you can say, put your hand up if you've been to Paris, or put your hand up if you'd like to become an excellent presenter, you know, or who here would like to be able to do X, Y, Z, put your hand up, right? You can do that in the face-to-face environment. But in the online environment, you don't have that capacity if people are on mute. Instead, what you can do is, all right, everyone, pop your answer to this question in the chat box. All right, if you've been to Paris, type yes or no in the chat box. Go for it, guys, type in the chat box, right? So you can insist on that response and engagement, which is really cool. Okay, and I'll go more into that later. But also, as part of the chat box, you can actually type messages to everyone, and you can type messages to each individual person as well, which is a really cool thing. And as a presenter, if you are sending a message, make sure that you select who you are sending it to. Don't make the mistake of sending the wrong message to the wrong person. All right, trust me, I've done it, and I know many trainers have done it, just out of a mistake. So just be aware of who you're sending your messages to, okay? So in regards to setup, really important that you get your setup right. Now, you don't need to go like completely all out in terms of expenses. You don't need to go podcast capacity and, you know, Joe Rogan kind of thing. But I do recommend that you do take your setup a little bit seriously. I do encourage you to have 2 screens because you'll be able to see what you're working on, and then you'll be able to see what's coming next, and you'll be able to access different documents if you've got 2 screens. Second thing that I've got here in this picture is I've placed my notes, all right? And I always print out my PowerPoint slides so I know what's coming next. Next, you do want to become aware of where is the camera lens, all right? Where's the camera lens? And you need to train yourself to look at that camera, because if you're looking away or like if you're looking at slides, there does become a disconnect between you and the audience, and it does take training to be able to be disciplined to look at that camera. And it's something I still work on myself, to be able to look at that camera lens. All right, not look at yourself, but look at the camera lens. Okay, so next, you want to, as I said, print off your slides so you know what's coming next, and you do want to have a headset. As you can see in the picture there, I say a headset because if you are stepping away from your computer, you may forget, and the sound, obviously the microphone is in your computer. So if you step too far away from it, your computer's not going to hear the sound and your participants won't hear what you say, all right? So that headset, quite cheap, but it's a great way to make sure that people are hearing you. all the time. All right. Next one is Crisp app. All right. This is something that I've just found works quite well to filter out all background noise. If you've got dogs or construction going in the background, the Crisp app will make sure that only the important things in terms of sound come across in your mic. All right. And that's a really good feature. Not too expensive, but it's something that I do highly recommend that all online presenters and trainers do invest in. All right. The sound is important. So next piece is all about the mindset and some hacks that you can implement in order to really get a great successful session. All right. So for the next piece, I highly recommend that you grab a pen and get ready to write. So the first one here is you must tell people how you want them to respond. Now, this is a little bit different to the face-to-face environment. You don't need to think about this, but this one is critically important. It's so important, right? That's why it's number one. So you have to tell people how you want them to respond. So as a presenter or a trainer, you might say, so how are we feeling today, guys? And people will sit there and go, am I meant to unmute myself and tell you the answer? Am I meant to type in the chat box? Am I meant to smile on the camera? What am I meant to do? So if you are going to ask a question to the audience, you have to tell them how you want them to respond. So you have to say something like, so how are we doing today, guys? Type in the chat box, how are you feeling? Good, bad, terrific, how are you feeling? All right. Or all right, guys, how are we feeling today? Everyone unmute yourself and one at a time, tell us how you're feeling. All right. So you have to get into the habit of telling them how you want them to respond. So it could be in the chat box. It could be unmute yourself. It could be go to the camera and do a happy face. Yay. All right. Or anything like that. But you have to tell people how you want them to respond. Make sure you get in that habit, right? Number two, no one gets left behind. Everyone must respond, all right? And this is the critical thing, and that's the difference between a presentation versus an engaging training session. So for example, if you've got 20 people or 30 people, or even 10 people in a room or on an online session, you have to set up the frame that you will not move on until everybody has responded in that chat box or everybody has unmuted themselves and contributed. Okay, because in a face-to-face environment, you can hold people accountable, but in the online environment, if at any time one person thinks that they don't need to respond, then they're going to sit back and just watch the show. But you need to set up the environment where you will not move on until everybody's contributed. Okay, if you set up that frame, then it will be very, very successful. Okay. Number three, ask lots of questions to the group and get people to type in their answer into the chat box. So, simple example, who here in today's session would love to become a powerful public speaker? Type yes into the chat box, right? Or it could be, who here in today's session would love to become a better presenter, be able to become a better team leader, and would love to become would love to make more money doing that? Type yes into the chat box. I'd love to do that, right? You can make it as crazy as you want, but it's about the engagement. It's about asking questions and getting people to type a response in the chat box. So it could be, all right, from the section that we've just covered, type yes if it makes sense for you. Type makes sense into the chat box, right? Or it could be, type for you personally, after the section that we've just covered, what is the biggest thing that has really stood out to you? What's the biggest thing you take away from the session? And get people to type in their chat box. All right, it's really getting people to respond in that chat box. All right, and that leads to point number four. You've got to set up the habit. And a way to do that is do a forced response. And a forced response could be within the first 1 to 2 minutes, get people to type something into the chat box, like type their name, type their email, type something they'd love to learn from the session. Could be anything at all, but you've got to get them used to just being in that chat box, right? And I love to do something around like just anything they're comfortable with sharing, just type in the chat box, type in the chat box, as quick as possible, getting them to use it. All right, number five, type X in the chat box is a great strategy, as we've talked about. Number 6, type X when you're ready to move on when doing an activity. So if you are facilitating people through an activity, it's really important that you keep everyone on the same page and up to pace. So what I like to do is say, all right, if you finish question 6, type the number 6 into the chat box. And that way I know that everybody's finished number 6, all right? And I don't move on until everyone's put number 6 in the chat box. Very simple thing, but it makes a radical difference, right? So if you're putting people into a breakout room and you bring them back, and then you could say, if everyone's ready to move on, type ready into the chat box, okay? Very simple things that you can do, but it's about getting the response that makes all the difference, all right? So the key things from this slide: tell people how you want them to respond, no one gets left behind, and be getting responses in that chat box as often as you can, all right? So next one, number 7, when introducing a new topic, go back to the camera and turn off your slides if possible, okay? Now, number 8, positioning. Ideally, if you can, where you've got your name, put educator and then your name. So educator, Mark Miles, or educator, Mary Smith, whatever it might be, okay? Number 9, look into the camera and look into the camera lens, not at the images of the people or their camera, because you'll be looking away, so to speak, and they won't feel that connection with you. Number 10, gesture appropriately. Yes, it's okay to gesture, but know when you are in camera frame and when you're not in camera frame, because they may not see your gestures, right? And number 11 there is take regular breaks, all right? So I like to encourage people with online delivery, take a break every 40 minutes. You don't want to be leaving it to a 90-minute mark, because people just will not be able to sit there and pay attention for the entire time. Okay, so from this slide, key thing to really remember is connection is key. Connection is key. And that leads on to our next point, which is the awkward truth that people's attention span really are dropping over time. People have got Twitter going on, Facebook, social media, they've got their family, they've got their, the distractions that are going on at home, which make it even harder to capture their attention and hold it. So you need to be aware in terms of time. Time is a lot more compressed in the online environment. It's a lot more compressed. So holding someone's attention, it's a really important skill to develop. So when we look at online delivery, we need to embrace the science of engagement even better than face-to-face. All right, you might be a very engaging presenter face-to-face, but online, you've got to ramp up your skills, your tonality, your inflection, your skills and your tactics even more. And you've got to set up activities for people to do in an even more engaging way. So let's unpack the science of engagement. Number 1, variety. Okay, V stands for variety on that slide there. And S stands for suspense. All right, variety plus suspense equals engagement. If those two things are strong, then you're always going to have strong engagement. So how can we use this to our advantage? Well, the idea is that ultimately you never want to do an activity in the same way that you did the last one. So just like in the face-to-face environment, you want to mix things up as much as possible. Well, same thing in the online space as well. So if you just put people in breakout rooms, that's cool. In the next activity, do individual self-reflection and then sharing in the chat box. Then the next activity, you do something else. And the next activity, you do something else. And you create variety. But also, you create variety within the activity as well. So if you're doing a breakout room, put different people with different people in the breakout room. Okay, so there's always a sense of wonder and anticipation of how is it going to happen next. Now, the next part of it is knowing that in order for something to be memorable and engaging, there must be significant levels of variety and a sense of, I don't know how it's going to happen, but it's going to be great. All right. And I'm going to feel good through the process. Okay. Now, in terms of different activities that you can do online, let's take a look at that because there's so many different things that you can do. So, number one, you can use the whiteboard. So, in Zoom, it has the function and the feature to be able to click share screen, and then you can actually click on a whiteboard and you can write things on the whiteboard and you can get other people to annotate on the whiteboard. You can certainly do that. You can show videos and you can go to YouTube and play videos for a length of like, generally I suggest like 3-4 minutes max. Anything longer than that, you will find that people will tune out. All right, so video length is important. Pair work, you can certainly set pairs up in breakout rooms. That's really cool. Research tasks, you can say to the audience, all right, I now want you to go off and research XYZ, come back and report back to the group on what you found. You can send them off to Google to research things. You can do that in a breakout room or just as the entire class say, all right, I want you to go off and research this thing. And then at 5:05, we're going to come back and have a chat about it, okay? Practical tasks, you can certainly do things on your camera and get them to follow along, or you could be doing something and they could be doing something at the same time. So you can certainly do practical tasks, but there can be a little bit of limitation around resources. Next, individual work. You can get them to answer questions and then put their like on a notepad, and then get them to put their responses in the chat box and then discuss it as a group. You can certainly do quizzes, and Kahoot's a great program to be able to set up quizzes. Or you can just do quizzes to the entire group where you put up the questions on your PowerPoint and they respond in the chat box, or they respond in breakout rooms. That's totally fine. Or unmute, like they unmute themselves and you ask direct questions to them. It's another strategy as well, right? Then we got polls. Polls are a great way to actually get people's levels of experience on a topic, or get people's emotions around a topic, or get people's, I guess, perceptions around a topic. Generally, you want to avoid doing polls for quizzes or for academic checking. More so, polls are good for opinions and finding out about people's situations, all right? But Zoom has that feature to be able to build polls into it, okay? So next, breakout rooms. Breakout rooms, one of my favorite things to use. And here are some tips on how to use them. So number one, always pre-assign people so that there is a waiting time for participants, all right? So ideally, once people have joined your session, you want to get that breakout room set up as quick as possible. And generally, I like to create about 6 or 7 rooms, and that gives me capacity to move people around. So if you've got, say, 10 people, you probably want to create 6 or 7 rooms. If you've got more than 10 people, you may want to create 20 rooms or so. But essentially, I'm looking to pair people up in breakout rooms when the time is right for an activity. Next thing, you want to, so coming back to the first point, you want to pre-assign people. You don't want to say, all right, we're now going to go into a breakout room. Just give me a moment as I assign you. Don't do it like that. Already have people pre-assigned. As soon as they've logged in, assign them to a breakout room and have that ready. So when you say, I'm now going to put you in a breakout room, there's no waiting for them while you're doing it. Next one, avoid going into the room yourself if you can, because there's no point really going in there and eavesdropping on conversations, all right? Just trust your participants, trust your audience that they will do what you tell them to do. Make sure that you time all your activities. So tell them, all right, I'm now going to pop you in a breakout room for approximately 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes, and tell them how long, because otherwise they head into a breakout room and they're not sure how long they're actually going to be there, and that can be quite awkward for participants. Next thing, be aware that when you do click close room, it does give them 1 minute warning before they're going to be automatically brought back in. All right, so just be aware of that 1 minute warning that people actually get. Next, you can use the broadcast message feature if you want to, and definitely check that out. I do love being able to broadcast messages to people in the breakout rooms. Really cool feature. Okay, so next thing, steps for setting up the breakout rooms. So number one, click breakout room. Okay, now one thing to be aware of with Zoom is the size of the screen. If you make it bigger or smaller, some of the features or functions down the bottom contract. So for example, if you have a very big wide zoom screen going on, it'll show everything down the bottom. But when you contract the screen, some of the features and functions go into the more section. All right, so there's a little button that says more. And anytime you can't see something, just know that it's probably gone into the more section, right? So when you click on more, it's going to have anything that's been contracted into that, right? So in order to find the breakout rooms function, sometimes you need to click on the more button, okay? So you click on more and it's going to give you an option to click breakout room. Now, when you click breakout room, it'll then ask you, do you want to create rooms manually or automatically? And do you want to assign people manually or automatically, right? So what I suggest that you do is create around 6 or 7 rooms, as I said, and you will always, it's better to click assign manually, because that gives you control around who goes into what room. And generally, I like to say, if you've got, say, 12, 15 participants, assign manually. All right, if you've got more than, say, 15, 20 participants, probably over 20, then you may want to do assign automatically. But be aware that the more control you've got over who goes where, the better, okay? But if you got 20 participants, it just becomes physically impossible for you to be able to assign people in the best way. So just do it automatically if you have to, all right? So we've got the steps here. We've got number 1, click breakout room. Number 2, click manually assign. Number 3, create rooms, and then you assign people. And basically what you can do is you click on the word assign. That's going to give you the list of each of the learners, and you can assign which room you want each person to go to. All right. Then you click open all rooms, and it's going to give an invitation to the person to head into the room. And then they disappear, so to speak, and they head into the room. Then what you can do is you can click close room, and then that will close all the rooms, okay? So ultimately with Zoom, the hardest thing, so to speak, to get used to is literally using breakout rooms, because it does take a little bit of playing around and getting used to how they work, okay? Now, in this video, essentially, all I wanted to go through was those basic things, okay? So the mindset about how to be really successful as a Zoom presenter, and the basic functions of the chat box and breakout rooms. So for me, with Zoom, it is a really great tool, but as we all know, the tool is only as good as the person that's using it, and it does take practice. It does take rehearsal. It does take making mistakes to get really good at it. And it does take practice to get conscious to be able to look in that camera and that camera screen, right? So I do want to encourage you, after you've watched this video, go and watch a couple of videos on some of the features and functions on Zoom and how to do different things. But know that you're going to learn the most through actually rehearsing. So get your friends together, get them to log in and play around with some of the features and functions, and just develop that confidence, right? That confidence to be able to go from bringing up your slides to closing them down, bringing up a YouTube clip and closing it down, and transitioning between your slides and, for example, your YouTube clip, okay? So the number 1 thing I'll just speak to for that is make sure that the item, so for example, your PowerPoint slides, make sure that they are open in the background. And when you go to click share screen, they're actually a choice that you can choose. So for example, some people say, oh, I can't find my PowerPoints. Well, it's really important your PowerPoints are open on the screen, and then you click on share screen and it'll give you the option to show your PowerPoints. Just like if you're bringing up a YouTube clip, you've got to have the web browser open in the background, and then you click share screen and it'll give you the option to show the YouTube clip, all right? So just be aware that you have to have things open in the background, and that's the really cool thing about having two monitors. You can actually have things open on different screens, and then you can select which screen you want to show your audience. Okay, so hopefully this video was valuable. Hope you got something out of it, and really encourage you re-watch some of the things that I've shared with you. Make sure you've taken notes, and I really encourage you to go away, play with some of the technical features, and play with asking questions in the chat box, getting people to respond, bringing up YouTube clips, closing your slides, and just getting comfortable with all the transitions that you need to make as a professional. Because the fastest way to look good on Zoom is to be able to go from one thing to the next without too much silence or too much time in between. All right. So on that note, hope you enjoyed the video, and looking forward to seeing you at a workshop in the future. And we wish you the very best on your learning journey as you become a great public speaker, presenter, and trainer. Bye for now.